The North Shore Drive podcast here in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette is back. We hope that everyone had a Merry Christmas and they're having a happy holidays. But we're back in swing here. We're here to give you some breakdown on that Steelers win over the Raiders. Ray Fittipaldo, of course, also the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette Steelers beat writer, had his grades over the weekend. I want to talk to him specifically about Kenny Pickett. Was there actual growth in how he led that final touchdown drive, or was that just the inevitable scoring that had to happen in a game where the defense was playing so dominant? Also, what led to that dominant defensive performance in how the Steelers played, and some interesting factoids about that performance. And is Chris Boswell all right? He's been having a struggling year. All that and more here on the North Shore Drive podcast, where Chris Carter and Ray Fittipaldo. Let's get into it.
You are now listening to the North Shore Drive Podcast, a show on all things Pittsburgh sports from the writers of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, hosted by Christopher Carter.
Hello and welcome to the North Shore Drive Podcast. I'm Chris Carter. He's Ray Fittipaldo. We are of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, breaking all things down for you here on the North Shore Drive Podcast, as you can find here Monday, Wednesday, Friday on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and especially on YouTube. If you're watching this video on YouTube, like the video, subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of our Monday, Wednesday, Friday episodes, as well as our daily content updates that we have from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Also, today's episode is brought to you by the Acrisure Fan Advantage, the power to project one of our Post-Gazette Steelers beat writers into your home or office. By using augmented reality, you can get an exclusive pregame breakdown from a Steelers expert standing right in your living room. Get the latest insights on starting lineups, key matchups, and critical stats at post-gazette.com/Acrisure Fan Advantage. No after downloads, just insider access to Steelers updates at post-gazette.com/Acrisure Fan Advantage, and get a real edge on this week's action. Ray, Kenny Pickett came off of missing basically, 1.5 or 1 3/4 of football with the concussion protocol that had happened, after the Raiders game, or in the Ravens game, excuse me. And he came into this game, and all game long, it felt like we were watching the press box. The Steelers defense was getting stop after stop after stop and interceptions and holding on. And the Steelers offense couldn't punch through until the final minute of the game when Kenny Pickett threw that touchdown pass to George Pickens, and everyone was relieved. And it was a special moment for Pittsburgh to get that win on the night they're celebrating Franco Harris just 3 days after he passed in such a tragic way. But was this a moment that you felt that Kenny Pickett rose to the occasion and grew and showed he can be the guy? Or was this just kind of like they had so many swings at it, they eventually just got it right?
Yeah, I think probably somewhere in between, Chris. I think just in terms of completing that moment is huge for the confidence. Not only Kenny and himself, but his teammates. Getting the ball to Pickens in that situation was big. But you're right. There were certain times within that football game where the offense struggled. There's a stat out there entering the fourth quarter. Steelers had 12 yards on 12 plays, Chris, in that third quarter. And it's been a theme all season. Slow starts to open games, slow starts to come out of second halves. Listen, there's 2 games left. You're probably not going to fix it now. That's one of those big picture off-season type projects they got to figure out. But, yeah, I mean, I do like Kenny coming through in that moment. I don't think people quite understand the pressure that was on the Steelers there.
Absolutely.
Just having to win that for Franco. I mean, what a downer that would have been if they didn't win that football game. So did you see how Cam Hayward was balling out all game? Like, Cam was not going to let them lose that game. But it's different on defense, right? On offense, you got to be on point, and you can't, you have to keep going and keep trucking along. And I thought, coming up in that moment was really, really big. Like I said, a lot of pressure on all those guys on offense, but I think especially Kenny Pickett because, he's the guy running the show.
Yeah, I certainly think so. Finding a way to get it done. And again, the elements should not be understated. It was extreme cold, not just cold. This was the coldest of the cold. And Ray, something that was said all through the draft process, when it gets really cold, Kenny Pickett won't be able to throw the football. And there were a couple misses that he had, but there were also a lot of plays that I think that he delivered really good passes. There were some really big drops, one by Pat Freiermuth that could have extended one of the drives where they had a missed field goal, one by Deontay Johnson over the middle where it looked like if he caught it, he had a lot of space to run, and either one of those catches changes the game. And Kenny Pickett had some misses, but I think that was that was categorical with the night and a rookie quarterback in these elements. But I thought he outplayed Derek Carr, a veteran quarterback with much more established weapons to work with Devontae Adams and Hunter Renfrow and Darren Waller and Josh Jacobs and all the things they had going for him. He was able to kind of keep his head in the moment and find ways to deliver. And I think he showed like, hey, I can play in this weather. And like you said, I think locking in and making it happen, and with the pressure that was mounted on them, I think that was a huge step up. And this is one of those things where people talk about the Steelers should tank. They should just throw the season down the drain. There's nothing to gain from it. I think moments like this with a young roster, Najee Harris, Kenny Pickett, Pat Freiermuth, George Pickens, all the players that are young, if you're 27 and under, I think these moments are important to build chemistry for future wins.
Yeah, there are certain things that you could try to simulate in practice, but there are game experiences that these guys have to go through, and that was certainly one of them. Getting back to what you were saying about the passing game, I don't know about you, Chris. I was surprised both teams threw the ball as much as they did in that bitter cold. I mean, it was freezing on Friday. It was a little bit better on Saturday, but I'm still surprised it was in the single digits when they kicked that ball off. I think it was 8 degrees. And I don't know, maybe the Raiders kind of got fooled by their early success on that first drive. They thought, hey, maybe we can do this all game. But, if they thought that was fool's gold. I know Carr came in here last year. Carr had a really good game, had some big plays. Mm-hmm. I don't know if they were thinking about that. I don't know, different coaching staff, so maybe not. But I just thought this game was cut out for Josh Jacobs. Najee Harris. I thought both teams would have run the ball more, but especially the Raiders, being that Josh Jacobs still is and was entering that game as the NFL's leading rusher.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And the way how you've seen so many teams beat the Steelers just by hammering away at that dam and just, we're eventually going to get a crack somewhere. We're eventually going to run the football and they're going to make a mistake. And he only gets 15 carries. Granted, when you're the Pittsburgh Steelers and you hold them to less than 3 yards per carry on 15 carries, that does make things tough. But like you said, I thought that they would try to find a way to stick to that run, to keep giving him opportunities just to hammer away at it. It said 30 pass attempts from Derek Carr, only 16 completions for 174 yards, 1 touchdown, and 3 interceptions. Let's talk about in a minute here about that defensive performance, because to me, I thought it was extremely special the way they stepped up in this game and made several big plays, even beyond the interceptions, to make sure that the Steelers offense had as many opportunities as it needed to make the comeback happen. The first time they've won all season when the other team has scored first. We'll talk about that here in a minute on the North Shore Drive podcast. But first, we got to talk to you guys about Valley Pool and Spa. The holidays are maybe coming to an end soon, but you don't need to feel bad about that, because you should go get yourself a hot tub or a swim spa or a sauna from Valley Pool and Spa, because it's going to help you relax. It's going to help you feel comfortable. And even as it gets colder in the winter, you're going to have something to enjoy in your home. So go to Valley Pool and Spa right now, and you can rejuvenate with one of their Finleo saunas that is sure to melt your stress away faster than the Frosty in Aruba. Save big now on all in-stock hot tubs, swim spas, and saunas by visiting valleypoolspa.com. That's valleypoolspa.com. Back here on the North Shore Drive podcast, I'm Chris Carter. He's Ray Fittipaldo. Ray, let's talk about this defense, because my goodness, I had to leave with Cam Hayward. Cam Hayward's had a lot of really special days in his time with the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's been here since 2011, but man, he looked like he was possessed at times in this game, just, changing the line of scrimmage against the run, getting after the quarterback. I believe he finished with 2 sacks in this game, leading the team. He had 7 tackles. Only one person who had more was Robert Spillane with 12. I thought the defensive line came to play. The secondary came to play. I saw Devin Bush flying around the field making his. Robert Spillane was flying around. This was, I thought, the best collective defensive performance they've had this year.
I would agree. They gave up fewer yards against the Saints, but this one felt different, and it was spearheaded by Hayward. And I thought it was special. You know, Cam is the longest tenured Steeler. He was born here. He visited here often when he was growing up because his grandparents and a lot of the family was here. So when he got drafted here, he was very much already in tune with what this franchise was all about. He already knew about Franco Harris. And in the last decade since he's been on the team, he got to know Franco Harris. He was on Franco's podcast on Tuesday, the day he passed. Franco, I think, did about a half an hour with Cam that day. So you could just tell that he wasn't going to let the Steelers lose that football game. And it's really, really special. I think just watching that game, knowing what was on the line and him doing that for Franco, I thought it was terrific. And for him being 33 years old, Chris, I don't know what the secret is, but whatever it is, Steelers ought to bottle it. Man, that guy is still a force. He's going to turn 34 in May, and he's playing. I know he didn't make the Pro Bowl this year, but he is still playing at that type of a level. So awesome game for Cam Hayward. And as you said, Ogunjobi played well. I thought all those guys on defense rose to the occasion, stepped up in that moment, and came through when the city needed them.
Absolutely, and you're right. The city needed them because, like you said, if they let down in this game, it is such a sour, sad note for Christmas. And they do it for Frank. They get a win for Franco Harris, and on the night they honor him. But and I said this with Brian Batko. I said there was going to need to be some classic Pittsburgh Steelers football. I was talking more about the offense and being able to run the football, but the defense had to come through too. Cam Hayward said this a lot when we asked him about it after the game. He was like, we had to make them one-dimensional. We had to make them one-dimensional. If they were going to beat us, they were going to beat us by doing other things, but they could not run the football. And they made sure they didn't. Josh Jacobs was limited. Again, the push they got against that Raiders offensive line. Granted, not a great offensive line, but still, they've been beaten up by some units this year, and I think it was huge for them to do that. And then, for Minkah Fitzpatrick, talking to him after the game, he said, hey, Davante Adams, this guy got 9 targets, only 2 completions for 15 yards. They said, hey, we plan to double him and then leave everyone else, had to win their matchups and their one-on-ones with Waller, with Renfro, with Abdullah, with Moreau, with all the other weapons, Mac Hollins and Josh Jacobs coming out of the backfield. All those other matchups the Steelers had to win, and they won most of them throughout the night. Like you said earlier with Darren Waller was probably the one deep pass that they gave up that was really huge. It set up a field goal. The touchdown pass to Hunter Renfro, which despite the touchdown happening, I thought it was really good coverage from Cam Sutton. It was just like the perfect throw from Derek Carr, and Renfro made a great play. But that's a collective effort from this team to be on it and make the Raiders earn everything that they did.
Yeah, absolutely. Sutton was in position. As you said, he gave up that touchdown, but boy, did he more than make up for it.
Oh, my goodness.
In the fourth quarter with that. I mean, that was a terrific interception. And, Minkah got one. Mollett, not known for being he's more known as a run-stopping nickel, and he's in there tipping the ball up into the air to himself and making a really nice play. So you mentioned it early. The Steelers' offense needed those opportunities. And even though they didn't cash in on them, it was really good to see the defense turn them over and, at the very least, just chip away at that, the confidence that the Raiders were having throughout that game. So secondary did a terrific job. I thought the entire defense played really well. I wrote this in Monday's paper, Chris. I think 6 out of the last 7 opponents since the bye week, Steelers have held those 6 out of those 7 teams to 17 points or fewer. So there's been some rocky points in there. The Ravens game wasn't great. They haven't been great throughout. That's pretty good. 17 points. Give that up every week in the NFL. You should win your fair share of games. And the Steelers are 5-2 since the bye.
They are. And I think this is a great segue because I was planning to ask you, the game that they had of the last 5 games, the only one they've lost was to the Ravens, where, yes, they gave up 16 points, but they also gave up 215 yards on the ground, most that they've had all season. Since then, 21 yards rushing allowed to the Panthers, 58 allowed to the Raiders, who had the number 1 rusher and still have the number 1 rusher in the NFL, and Josh Jacobs. Is something different about this run defense? Are they charged up? Have they figured something out that can help them get back against the Ravens this upcoming week? Because to me, that would be a great sign of growth if they did it. But I also think the big difference might be that the Ravens' offensive line is just that much bigger and better than their last couple opponents.
Yeah, I mean, that's very true. You do have to give them credit. The Panthers ran the ball excellent before the Steelers game. They ran the ball excellent after the Steelers game. So you do have to give the Steelers credit for that game, and we'll have to give them credit for that Raiders game too. I don't care about the state of the Raiders offensive line. Jacobs has been putting up yards all season, and the Steelers did the job on him. Having said that, these last 2 games I think are going to be the biggest test. I don't know about the Browns, and they're out of it. I don't know what they're going to be playing for.
Yeah.
Ravens are still playing for a division title. Ravens are still playing for seeding, and they gashed the Steelers less than a month ago. So Steelers know what's coming. Everyone in the NFL knows what's coming Sunday night. They're going to try to bully them, and they're going to try to shove the ball down their throats again. And we'll see if the Steelers are up to the task. I will say one thing. If Cam Hayward plays that way again, if Larry Ogunjobi plays that way again, they'll have a shot. They will not give up 215 yards in this game. But again, it's going to be a really tough task. The Ravens run the ball really, really well. And they've been doing it this well for about 3-4 years now.
And something again to point out, you were right about the Panthers. The Steelers gave up just 21 yards on the ground. The week before against the Seahawks, the Panthers ran for 223 yards. Just this past weekend against the Lions, they ran for 320 yards. So you're talking about 543 yards in 2 games, and the Steelers were the anomaly that had them their fewest rushing yards all season long. So maybe you're right. Maybe something is. And after that Ravens game, Cam Hayward, Larry Ogunjobi, Miles Jack, all down the line, they all said, we were not fooled. We didn't play well. We got beat. We got beat up front. We can't let that happen. Sometimes it's as simple as that in football, is that, people want to make it about scheming and concepts and this. And there's times to talk about that because I do that a lot. But sometimes it's just about beating the man in front of you. The Steelers have done it the last 2 weeks. Will they do that this upcoming weekend? We'll see, because we'll have our whole slew of Steelers reporters on hand. But we've talked about both sides of the ball when it comes to scrimmage. We got to talk about special teams, because Chris Boswell, it's been rough this year, and it was another rough one on Saturday night. It could have proved costly. It ended up not. But I want to talk to Ray about his insight on what's going on with Boswell and what may be either wrong there or just needs to get better, or what's going on. We'll talk about that in just a minute here on the North Shore Drive podcast. But first, got to talk to you guys about Yinzers in the Berg. Yinzers, listen up. If you need to do some late holiday shopping, and for your favorite Pittsburgh sports fans, go to Yinzers in the Berg right now, because they have 2 stores in the Strip District that you can visit. Or if you're from out of town, hit up YinzersPGH.com. They'll have all the Steelers gear, Penguins gear, Pirates gear, Pitt gear, anything Pittsburgh sports, they've got. And they got so many different things that you can get: winter clothing, T-shirts, anything that you can imagine. There's apparel, accessories, and so many things there. You can only find it by going to either one of their stores in the Strip District or by going to their website, YinzersPGH.com. That's YinzersPGH.com for all your Pittsburgh sports apparel. Back here on the North Shore Drive podcast, I'm Chris Carter. He's Ray Fittipaldo. We're breaking things down here. We talked Steelers offense. We talked Steelers defense. Let's talk Steelers special teams, and specifically Chris Boswell, because this has been kind of unique this year for some of the struggles that he's had. Missed 2 field goals in this game, and all game long I was like, man, like The 52-yarder, I felt like Mike Tomlin could have gone for instead of putting him in that situation after he missed the first kick. But the first kick, I'm like, Chris Boswell's been automatic, and he's been automatic in crazier conditions than that game. You know, the snow game in Buffalo back in 2016, and a lot of crazy situations. Is something wrong with Boswell, or is he just coming back from that injury and just maybe needed to get back into his groove, right?
Yeah, I mean, obviously he dealt with that injury that kept him out for about a month or so. And if you watch him, Chris, it doesn't look like he's following through like he normally would. So maybe that groin is still bothering him a bit. I mean, to me, if you're the Steelers, maybe you just go with Matthew Wright for the rest of that season, and you just keep him on the shelf. It's probably not going to matter. If you do remember, Boswell had an injury back in 2018. He missed that Saints game, correct? The one that was so costly to them not making the playoffs that year.
Missed, I think it was multiple field goals against the Raiders in that year too, especially a potential game winner that they would have had that would have sent them to the playoffs. And I was just feeling like, man, this seems very familiar with the way he was playing against the Raiders this year.
Yep. So in this day and age in the NFL, Chris, missing 7 field goals in one season is a lot. Boswell has gone through seasons when he's made the Pro Bowl, missed 3, missed 4. Missing 4 field goals for Chris Boswell is kind of like an average. Like you said, he's been automatic. So, yeah, are we spoiled because he's been so good? Yeah, we are. But again, he's the second highest paid kicker in the league, and when you're making that kind of coin, you're expected to come through.
You are. And to your point, in his career, he has an 86.4 field goal percentage overall. The last 3 years, he was 90% or higher. In almost every year, he's been 80% or higher. 2016, he was 84%, but every other year he was 90+%. The 2 years where he's struggled and he's missed 7 kicks in both years so far, the 2018 season when it was revealed afterwards that he was dealing with an injury, he was 13 of 20 that year, 65%. Now he's 15 of 22 for 68.2%. Maybe injury is the key. He's come back from it before, though, Ray. If I'm the Steelers, or if you're the Steelers, do you give him that chance to come back next year and be like, hey, we're going to keep you on the same contract. Let's just figure this out and you get healthy?
Yeah, I mean, if you remember what Kevin Colbert did in 2019 is they basically took his signing bonus away and said, the only way you're going to get this signing bonus is if you come to training camp and you prove that you're back to being the kicker that you once were. So I don't know if Omar Khan is going to have the same tact. I don't know, quite honestly, if the agent for Chris Boswell would want to do that again. Maybe they say, hey, we'll cut us and, we'll go kick somewhere else. So I don't know if it's going to come to that, but Chris Boswell, it's a big offseason for him. He's got to get right. A lot of years left on that contract. And again, when you make $5 million a year to kick balls in the NFL, you got to do your job, because there's a lot of kickers out there who are making league minimum. And if this goes on for very much longer, I'm not talking this year, but I'm talking in the next season, then Chris Boswell is not going to be around to enjoy making all that money that's on this contract.
Agreed. And just to put things in perspective, like coming into this season, Chris Boswell and Justin Tucker were on, and Justin Tucker still is, he's like the best kicker that ever lived, but both of them had better numbers than the best kickers that have, like, I think there's only one kicker in the Hall of Fame. Their numbers are better than that guy. Their numbers are better than Adam Vinatieri's. Like, if you have a kicker in mind, their numbers had been better than that. But I also think you're seeing it happen more across the board. I think whatever kicking camps or science that kickers have started to figure out, the Bengals kicker, there's so many more guys that are coming out and being automatic. It seemed like for years that, like, you were very lucky if you found a guy that was consistent. The average was just missing, kind of as much as Boswell has this year. Now it seems like every team, almost, I'd say 8 out of 10 teams in the NFL has a kicker that they can rely on to make, a 45+ yard field goal.
Well, Jan Stenerud, I think, is still the only place kicker in the Hall of Fame. And if you go back and look at his percentages, you're like, why is this guy here? But Chris, if you think about it, how many of those games did he play? Were they on grass?
Right.
How many games now are on artificial surfaces and or indoors? I mean, it's really kicker friendly right now when you can play the amount of games you do in domes and on the field turf, and some of these venues that are very warm weather types of cities. So there's a reason the percentages are higher. I give Boswell great credit. And Tucker too. I mean, Tucker probably a little bit better weather conditions, right, than what Chris faces. But for Chris to do what he does in Pittsburgh, that's why he's the second highest paid kicker in the league. And the Steelers have become used to him being money, and he's got to get back to that.
No, yeah, I agree with that. I'll also point that there's also that natural growth that happens with sports where the 70s Steelers, you can't pit them against today's NFL teams because guys are just that much faster now. Like it's just the science of how to train is different. And I think it's the same thing with kickers. Kickers today know so much more about kicking the football than they did back when Stenerud played. Like it's just it's a different level of preparation of all the they've been able to learn from all the greats that have come and gone and say like, hey, you know what? That's what this guy did. That's what this guy did. And I'll admit, as a guy who loves to study film and loves to talk about the things about the game, I know nothing about those little things that they do to make sure, other than it looked like he followed through, looked like they did the right thing there. All right, they made the kick. But I think that's also a part of it. It's different this time around. And, I think that'd be interesting to see, Chris Boswell, you got to give him the chance. He's only 31 years old. It's not like he's aging out of being a kicker. He could kick for another 9 years, I think, if he really wanted to. Just a matter of, is his injury, long standing and affecting his form, or, is it, or is this just another 1 year thing? Well, he'll get back next year, because 2018, there was talk about cutting him then. He went on to make 93.5% of his field goals, including making an important 50-plus yard field goal that year. Before we wrap up, your thoughts on Presley Harvin. Ray, I think that I was on board with the narrative that he needed some time to deal with what happened with last year, losing, I think it was his dad and his grandmother in such a quick span, and the mental capacity weighed on him all year long. But I felt like this year was his year to show he could be more consistent. There's times where he's had some really good moments, but right now he just looks like a second-year punter that can't consistently punt well.
Yeah, I mean, the Raiders game was actually okay. I think he had 3 punts, averaged almost 47 yards. But overall, in the big picture, it's just the inconsistency week to week, right? I mean, that's if you're going to be a team like the Steelers where you're going to rely on your defense and the offense is still a work in progress, you need your punter to be really good. You need that guy to be able to do the coffin corner kicks, to pin teams deep. So they have to go the long field on your defense. And when that's not happened, that's just another, strike against you. That's less margin for error when you're a team like the Steelers that's not perfectly built right now. You got certain things in place, but you need a little bit of help from your special teams, and you're not getting it right now. So, yeah, I mean, we thought this past offseason was big for Presley Harvin. I think it is again. I think what you will see is probably more serious training camp competition for him now. I think it'll actually bring in somebody that they think might be able to take his job, and hey, maybe under pressure, he might be able to step up and perform. But I think overall special teams, every facet of special teams this year has been somewhat disappointing, and it's led by the kicker, and a close second is the punter, Presley Harvin. Danny Smith, his units this year, I'm not saying it's Danny's fault, but his units this year largely have underperformed.
Yeah, and that's uncharacteristic because special teams has been such a reliable thing for the Steelers over the years, whether it was kicking, punting, or coverage, and they haven't given up a score this year, but the long return they gave up against the Colts was a little worrisome. They responded with a good week against the Falcons, but I'm right with you. This has been an underwhelming year for Steelers special teams, which is again, uncharacteristic for Danny Smith. We'll see how that plays out the rest of the way. We got a lot more coming your way this week. The Steelers, Mike Tomlin's back at it on Tuesday. We'll have our guys on hand for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette at the Steelers facility on Tuesday. So pay attention for all of that at post-gazette.com and all the coverage that we're bringing there. Also, stay tuned for everything going on with this podcast Monday, Wednesday, Friday for the North Shore Drive podcast. We'll be back Wednesday, and then we'll be back Friday previewing Steelers-Ravens as the Steelers, their playoff hopes are still alive. We'll talk more about that all this week goes along. Thanks again for checking out the North Shore Drive podcast. A belated Merry Christmas to everyone out there who celebrates, and happy holidays for everyone out there. We hope that you're enjoying special time with family. Back with you really soon right here on the North Shore Drive podcast.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the North Shore Drive podcast of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. If you're watching this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. For 6 months of digital access to post-gazette.com for just $6, click the link down below in the description.